Hello, welcome to my How to Tabletop series, where I give my take on how to handle things that may come up on the topic of tabletop role playing. Today, we're going to go into running a campaign module, the pre-built adventures that are often released with tabletop systems. These can be used to introduce a campaign, or even introducing uh, an entire system. Um, Something like 5th edition, you'll have ones that go up to level 3, some that go all the way to level 20. Rebuild Adventure is a great tool for GMs old and new, but how do I choose one? How do I run it? Those are questions you may find yourself asking, and we're going to go over all that here. First off, let's go over how to choose a module. There are a few different ways to do this, and first off is obviously making sure you know which system you want to run. What I usually do when picking modules, first off, is I will read descriptions of the modules available for whatever system. Now, not every system has modules. Babylon Ultima only has the, press start guide, and Anima Beyond Fantasy only has the one in the GM toolkit. 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, as well as Pathfinder, on the other hand, have many available campaign modules. And between that and wanting to make sure you can run a campaign for your group, why I say you want to make sure you know which system you want to use. For today's example, we're going to use Pathfinder 2nd Edition, a system I know well and I have a full process for. So, which adventure path do I want to use for my group? First thing I'll do, what I'll do from this point is I go in and I'll read a few different examples. So here are 4 adventure paths I may be looking at. We have Kingmaker. Face off against bands of bloodthirsty bandits, deadly and dangerous monsters, and mysterious menaces from other realities as you fight to claim the stolen lands as your own. Will you rule with justice and mercy, or will you become the very monsters you fought to oppose? In the Kingmaker adventure path, the destiny of the world's newest nation is yours to decide. Bloodlords. The undead nation of Geb gains most of its international trade from the export of food grown on zombie-worked farms. Lately, one farm has been the site of a series of strange occurrences. Bloodlord's Adventure Path is a 6-part monthly campaign in which characters rise from skilled troubleshooters to join the Bloodlords who rule a land of the dead. Outlaws of Alkenstar, a gang of outlaws, each with their own grudge against the villains who wronged them, join forces to get their revenge. In the steam-powered city of Alkenstar, where most of business is as orderly as the hands on the clock, these rugged anti-heroes will have to go against the grain if they're to settle their vendettas. Quest for the Frozen Flame? For generations, the Broken Tusk following has roamed their small patch of the realm of the Mammoth Lords in relative peace. Now, to avoid annihilation from a maniacal warhorde, they must flee into the unknown. After reading them, I see if any of them catch my eyes. We're going to assume Kingmaker and Bloodlords. We'll look a bit more into them, what levels they might involve, if there's free info available, such as something Paizo does, where they give a free player's guide, which offers up very base info that you can give to your players. I then give my group, a general overview, like they show there, as well as I will let them know what kind of levels they are, and then my group will show interest in whatever they want, and we'll see what we're happy to play. Now then, what's next? Read. I cannot stress this enough. Read through the books. Understand the big bad, setting, the plot, players' goals as best they can relate. Give it a solid read and note everything that may catch your eye for the sake of updating or just because you think it's notable. Keep your notes near you as you read. If you notice things connecting that you've been thinking about updating or things you think are noteworthy, write those down as well. Then, read it again. Having your knowledge you read through, and maybe you want to adjust what what you've noticed and change it possibly. Maybe you want to leave it alone, or you'll notice things that slip by you initially that might give you an idea of, hey, I maybe I need to put emphasis on this for my players. Once you've done that, give yourself little notes of some kind in the book. I would suggest things like sticky notes or just index cards between the pages, or even they have little paper tag stickies that you can put on the book. Anything to keep track of the things you've adjusted. So what kind of things can you adjust with the campaign? Long story short, anything. Don't like the big bad's motivations? Change them. Don't like who the big bad is? Change them. Don't like the setting? Adjust it. Don't like the NPCs? Swap them out. I'm currently running a Kingmaker campaign. And for those who don't know, Kingmaker has a video game available that goes through the entire campaign. It uses the Pathfinder 1st Edition rules, but importantly, the game goes through a lot of the story beats that are relevant to the campaign. A player of mine let me know, which I'm very thankful for, as we were prepping to run the campaign, that he'd been playing the video game. So I decided to take out the main cast of NPCs that they interact with, and I've been swapping them out just to, keep things interesting, keep them on their toes. Now, obviously, I could have just swapped out the NPC that is the troublemaker and maybe a couple others so that nobody know who to keep their eyes on, but I decided to swap out all of them. I've added small events to the campaign related to those characters, and even linked them to already existing situations within Kingmaker. During some events, I've swapped the reasoning for characters to do things, turning the old Sycamore into what was once a game polluted by the traitorous character, now turned into a war between the kobolds and Mitflits. Sure, the motivation may have changed, but the goal of the characters hasn't. End the battle, potentially have one, if not both, on their side when the kingdom portion of the campaign begins. Obviously, before you go rewriting an entire campaign, it's important to set a few guides for yourself. If you want to change the setting for the campaign, you'll need to make sure there are equivalents in the world for what you need. Using Kingmaker, for example, if you want to run that, but you don't want an area full of greenery and forests, you want it in a desert, you'll have your work cut out for you. Possibly adjusting the old Sycamore into a fairly large old cactus, swapping out a lot of forests for old ruins, even changing some of the river-based encounters to maybe featuring chasms such as Nettle's Crossing. Keep in mind the scope of what you'll be changing, and this is why I say to read through the module, once or twice before you run the campaign, once to identify the story, the other to guarantee your changes fit. After this, as always, Session 0. Now, that's obviously where you design your characters, come up with backstories, all the other Session 0 things, which I do have another video in the works that I will be discussing Session 0. And from there, run the campaign. Keep in mind your adjustments, be ready to change things on the fly, but enjoy the campaign. Now, here's the question. Why use a module? Maybe you aren't too familiar with the system and want to introduce the players to it. While some stories or some systems have introductory campaigns, such as Fabula Ultima with its Press Start guide, that slowly introduces the mechanics. Not all the games have these. A pre-made campaign will generally take a lot out of the guesswork, making it easier to run a campaign. They'll list the travel time from A to B, encounter mechanics, or tell you where to find the rules for such things. It takes a lot of creativity to adjust a pre-made adventure, and if you want to change an NPC, you need to make sure the change is consistent across all of their interactions. If you change the villain to be a person hellbent on saving the world, they then can't be committing these deplorable acts with no reason. It doesn't make sense for them to call for betterment of the world while burning down an orphanage for laughs. If you change an ocean-faring campaign to be in a desert, you'll need to make adjustments, as Sahagin wouldn't be in the sandy oceans, but maybe lizard folk are, or instead of whales, sandworms are a huge threat for ships. Pieces don't fit right, it takes away from the immersion and thus the ultimate enjoyment of the campaign. Now, as I said, modules are a great way to learn a new system. They can give you a lot of information, making it easy to introduce players and ease them into things they'll be doing regularly in a campaign. As a GM, seeing how the campaigns are written professionally can give you ideas for things like balancing encounters, creating social interactions, or even handling travel time. Also a great introduction to a world you may not be familiar with. In 5th edition, Dragonlance has a campaign in the back of the book that can do a great job of introducing some of the world to your players and show you how things may feel in a campaign within the Dragonlance setting. A final reason to run a module is what can be summed up as war stories. This is a term I first heard from Seth Skorkowski, who I definitely suggest you going to watch after this video. Shared experiences among tabletop gamers are so interesting to listen to. Those who have played Curse of Strahd may remember the battle at Yester Hill. In my campaign, Strahd appeared on the back of a nightmare, mocking us and attacking us. My character, an arcane cleric sick of his shenanigans, used my turn ability to affect the nightmare. Suddenly, Strahd, as he's making fun of us, lets out a yell as the nightmare speeds away at full blast with him on it, making the battle much easier for us. If I tell that story, I don't need to preface it with, all this lore and such, because other D&D players likely have played it, with Curse of Strahd being one of the most sold books. Yeah, as I said, book is sold a lot. Now, these numbers are a little over a year old, but it doesn't change the clear fact that Curse of Strahd has been collected by a lot of people. Likely a lot of people have their own tales at Yester Hill. Now, you obviously can always talk about homebrew campaigns, it's just they may need a little bit more information fed to them. Now, I want to address something really quickly. When it comes to running modules, there has been this weird belief by some that, new players, myself included when I was fall victim to, where running a module is uncreative or lazy. Where running a module makes you not a real GM, and to that I say, honestly, bullshit. Normally, I even wrote the word shenanigans here. I'm gonna just say bullshit. When I started running tabletop games, I had the same belief. Why? Because I never looked at the modules. It was an idea put in my head by others, and I never even considered running a module because of it. My opinion changed on them when a friend of mine ran the first module I'd ever sat in on sessions for, Horde of the Dragon Queen. The Liberation of Greenest didn't feel railroaded. It felt like something we had options with, and our GM made it very clear that we didn't need to fight our enemies since we had alternatives. I was using minor illusion to make it so that rather than fighting these enemies with a crowd of civilians in tow, we could just divert enemies. A simple 2 sessions showed me that there's no real difference between a module and a homebrewed campaign. When I ran the campaign myself years later, it even further showed me that there's no real difference between the two, and as the steps I laid out show, I feel like this is an excessively less amount of work than writing a homebrew campaign. It could arguably be more work, and I definitely think it's fairly creative if you're adjusting literally anything. Now, players, I suggest you don't read a campaign module your GM is running. While the GM can always adjust things, make them more personal, and harder to predict, it could do a lot of damage since you know what to expect in the long run. I've run a module where a player didn't warn me that he had read it ahead in the book, and you could see on his face anytime I introduced a situation that I didn't adjust that he just wasn't having as much fun. When he finally told me he read the module about 3/4 of the way through it, I mentioned I could tell, but at that point I'd been too far in to make the adjustments to fix it. I made small adjustments here or there, but it really drained the fun out of it for him to not be surprised, to always have an idea of where to go. So unless you're actively planning on running a campaign, do not read the module, and if you are going to run a campaign, pick a different module than what your GM is currently running. I promise, if you read the module that your GM is running, you will be having less fun. So, this is how and why to run a campaign module for tabletop RPGs. Do you agree? Do you think I missed something? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed, and maybe drop a subscription if you're new here. I'm live on Twitch and YouTube all but Mondays and Wednesdays, and run a tabletop live play called Fabulous Misfits alternating Fridays. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.